Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is 5090 O-level biology, and this is the chapter on human reproduction. And this is the second video in which we're going to try and complete the menstrual cycle, which has always been an enigma for all the students, and they've always had problems understanding it. And I hope this video is going to help you understand it and make it a little better, the understanding and the clarity of the topic. Now, I like to start the menstrual cycle on a simple footing, and I'm not going to mix the hormones. I'm just going to first give you the sequence of events, and then I'm going to give you the hormones because you mix the two of them. Now, this is usually, as you can see, what I've drawn is that it is usually a 28-day cycle. So, if a woman starts menstruating on the 1st of January, and so she's going to start her next cycle on the 29th of January. You see, it's usually a 28-day cycle. That's an average. But of course, some women have a 30-day cycle, some even have a 32-day cycle. So it is an average which I'm talking about. Now I've divided this into sort of three portions or four portions. The first is day 1 to day 5. Now if you see here day 1 to day 5, now just follow me and don't go ahead. Day 1 to day 5, what is happening? In the uterus, the lining is being shed. So this lining is going to break off, it's going to go into little pieces, and this is going to be passed out with a little blood through the vagina. So this is called the menstruation or the menstrual cycle, in which the first 5 days or sometimes even 7 days the lining is shed. So the lining is shed. Please remember, it's not the wall of the uterus which is shed, which you got it wrong, because the wall of the uterus has a muscle in it and you can't lose the wall of the uterus. So this lining is shed, and that is day 1 to day 5. So we're talking of day 1 to day 5. We're talking of this time period, right? Now, nothing is happening in the ovary at that time. So we're not talking anything on the ovary. So nothing happening in the ovary, and we're not talking about the ovary at this time. Nothing happening here. Then day 6 to day 13. Now, this is the point where we need to understand it. First of all, the lining repairs. So this lining is going to repair and it's going to reform, and we're going to have an intact lining. So this lining repairs in the uterus. Now, what is happening in the ovary? Now, this is a diagram of the ovary which I've drawn, and I've done this in the first video as well, but still, if you haven't seen that, it's okay. So, in the ovary, what is happening is that the ovum has been formed. So, this is the ovum, and around it is surrounded by cells which are called follicle cells. So, follicle cells have come from the ovary, and this whole structure is called a Graafian follicle, and it comes to lie on the surface of the ovary, and it forms a blister on the surface of the ovary. Blister is, when you burn your hand, it forms, in Urdu we call it a chala. So blister, it forms a blister on the surface of the ovary. So this Graafian follicle develops in the ovary, and the lining repairs. So day 6 to day 13. So we're talking about the time period here till here, day 6 to day 13. So day 6 to day 13, I said that the lining repairs in the uterus. And the second thing is, in the ovary, the ovum has formed and the follicle cells have collected around it. And then some of the cells liquefy and it forms a fluid-filled space. And this whole structure here is called a Graafian follicle. This whole structure here is called a Graafian follicle. So during this time, what has happened is that the Graafian follicle has developed. Now, the Graafian follicle development is dependent on two hormones, estrogen and FSH, which is called follicle stimulating hormone. So two hormones are needed at the moment. Just keep it to that, and don't get worried that you don't know these two hormones. We'll develop it as we go along. So day 1 to day 5, number 1, lining is shed, nothing's happening in the ovary. Day 6 to day 13, in the ovary, the Graafian follicle develops, and in the uterus, the lining repairs and is reformed and replaced by new cells which are formed, and so the lining is repaired. Now let's look at what happens on day 14. Now on day 14, it's a very important day because ovulation occurs. Ovulation means what? Ovulation means that this ovum, which is the black dot which I've drawn, and some of the follicle cells are going to be released from the surface of the ovary. So this Graafian follicle, which had the ovum and that, is going to burst, and this is going to be released from the surface of the ovary into the fallopian tube, or which is called the oviduct. Now what is left behind? Left behind is the remains of the follicle, and this remains of the follicle is called the corpus luteum. And this corpus luteum produces progesterone. So look what I've said. I've said day 14 ovulation occurs, and then I said corpus luteum forms, and I said this corpus luteum produces progesterone. So this is the most important event, because when this ovum is released, it has only 2 days and it has to be fertilized. If it's fertilized, fine, pregnancy will take place. If it's not fertilized, well, it'll just die. And there's not something, it's not going to die, it's just going to do, these cells just dissolve, and they sort of disintegrate in the oviduct. Nothing's going to happen. So this is day 14, and this is called ovulation. Now let's look at day 15 to day 26. Now, under the effect of progesterone, the lining becomes spongy and vascular. Why? Because we are anticipating that if the ovum becomes fertilized, it's going to come and implant here. So the lining has to become spongy and vascular. Spongy means air spaces develop, vascular means a capillary network develops. So now it is getting ready for implantation. The corpus luteum, which is in the ovary, which was the remains, if you remember here, the corpus luteum remains in the ovary, and it keeps on producing progesterone. And this progesterone actually makes the lining more spongy and vascular. Then we come on to day 27 to 28. Now, if pregnancy has taken place, the woman will not menstruate. So the embryo will start developing, and then the fetus and all that. But if no pregnancy has taken place, then the estrogen progesterone levels of the hormone fall, as no pregnancy has occurred, and the next cycle will start to begin. So that is day 27 to day 28. So this is the brief overlay of the menstrual cycle. Day 14 ovulation. Day 1 to day 5 lining is shed, Graafian follicle develops. Day 6 to day 13 Graafian follicle develops, lining repairs. Day 14 ovulation occurs. Day 15 to day 26 the lining becomes more spongy and vascular. The corpus luteum remains and keeps on producing progesterone. Day 27 to 28 pregnancy is not taken place. Now we're going to prepare for the next menstrual cycle to start. Let's look at the hormones. The hormones we've talked about are 4. The first thing you've got to remember is that it's the hormones estrogen and progesterone, which are produced by the ovary. So estrogen, progesterone produced by the ovary. Pituitary gland produces 2 hormones, FSH and LH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and LH stands for luteinizing hormone. Now, if you look at this, which I have made, it's a very simple diagram that I have made. Estrogen level remains high. So this is estrogen. Estrogen remains high, goes up and then dips a little bit, and then remains high, and then of course it comes down by day 28. Now you see progesterone is produced, as you remember, is produced by the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum is formed on day 14. On day 14, corpus luteum is formed. So you see estrogen rises. Estrogen was 0, and then it rises, and then it remains high, and then it sort of comes down on day 26, and then of course remains 0. So estrogen and progesterone remain high during the second period after day 14. Then we need another hormone which is called FSH. Now this FSH is needed for the story in the beginning, that is the day 5 to day 13, the development of the Graafian follicle. So you see it's high during day 5 to day 13 and then again it's zero. Follicle stimulating hormone for the development of the follicle which was happening inside the ovary. This diagram, this is the time that when we needed the follicle stimulating hormone. So from day 6 to day 13, we needed the follicle stimulating hormone to develop the Graafian follicle in the ovary. Then you look at LH. And LH is a hormone in which we say it is a surge. Surge means a sudden increase and then a sudden decrease. So you see on day 13 it goes up and then it goes down again. So this is called the typical LH surge. And we need it for what? We need it for the ovulation. We need it because luteinizing hormone. So when the ovum is released from the surface of the ovary, then what remains behind is called the corpus luteum, and that is the luteinizing hormone. So LH is the period of time in which it suddenly increases on day 14 and then of course again is zero after that. So luteinizing hormone. And these are produced, FSH and LH are produced by the pituitary gland. Now another thing which I just want to add here is, you see this is the part of the graph which helped us to develop the birth control pill for women, the oral contraceptive pill. You see here progesterone is high and estrogen is high, both are high. Estrogen and progesterone are high. Now when estrogen and progesterone are high, FSH is zero. Here there is no FSH. FSH is zero here. So some brilliant medical person came up with a brilliant idea, is that if we give a woman a tablet of estrogen and progesterone and she takes it every day, then the pituitary gland will think that it is in the second phase of the menstrual cycle, so no FSH will be released. So any woman who wants to have a spacing between the children or wants to use a birth control pill, she takes this tablet every day and it contains estrogen and progesterone. Now, as she takes it, it's absorbed from the blood, it is absorbed from the stomach and then it enters the blood, and the estrogen progesterone levels remain high. So no FSH is released by the pituitary. No FSH is released, so no ovulation, no follicle develops. The woman cannot get pregnant. So this is the part of this is called the biological basis of the contraceptive pill, is this part of the graph. Is this part of the graph in which estrogen and progesterone are high and FSH is zero. So we give women tablets to take and they have to take this tablet every day, and it causes the blood levels of estrogen and progesterone to rise. When estrogen and progesterone levels are high, pituitary detects that and pituitary does not release any FSH. So no FSH release, no follicle develops, no ovulation, no pregnancy. So this is of course the biological basis of the oral contraceptive pill, which a woman has to take, and she can take it for as long as she likes, for maybe months or years as she likes, as taken by millions of women all over the world. Now another topic which is in your syllabus is the fertile phase of the cycle and the infertile phase of the cycle. Now it is very simple to understand if you can just remember that on the 14th day ovulation took place. So the ovum was released from the surface of the ovary. The ovum only lives for 2 days. So it means the ovum is only alive from day 14 to day 15 one day and 15 to 16 second day. So this is the time that the ovum is living, 14th to 16th. But then why do we say 11th to 16th is the fertile phase of the cycle? Why is it the 11th to 14th? The reason is that if a sperm was deposited on day 11, the sperm is still going to be there. So when on day 14 ovulation takes place, fertilization will take place. Because sperms live for 3 days. So day 11 to day 16 is the fertile phase of the cycle. Well, why not before that? Before that, because there is no ovum before that. The ovum is released on day 14. After day 16, why is it the infertile phase? Day 16 is the infertile phase. After this is infertile because there is no ovum living. Before this, there is no ovum released. The ovum is released on day 14. So the infertile phase is the time when the ovum is not there. So there's no ovum, there's no fertilization, there's no question of any fertilization taking place. So the fact that the ovum lives for 2 days and the fact that sperms can survive for 3 days, so we say day 11 to day 16 is the fertile phase. So we say that is the fertile phase because please understand it. Why are we calling it the fertile phase? Because if on day 14 the ovum is released, it's living for day 14 to 15 one day, 15 to 16 second day. But if sperms were there on day 11, they're still alive on day 14 because sperms can survive for 3 days. So this is the part of the syllabus in which we have to discuss the fertile phase of the cycle and the infertile phase of the cycle. Now let's look at the topic of birth control. And basically birth control is for spacing. If a couple doesn't want to have any kid, they've had a kid and they want 3 or 4 years before they want to have the second kid. So number one, spacing. Number two, limit the number of children. A couple wants to have 2 kids, three, four. They don't want to have, they have to decide. They can prevent pregnancies. So birth control. So the different headings that we are supposed to talk to you about is natural, chemical, mechanical, hormonal, and surgical. Now in natural, this is the thing that we were talking about, the fertile phase. So if a woman doesn't want to become pregnant, well, day 11 to 16, she has to abstain from sexual intercourse. So this is a natural method. There is no such thing as there's no chemical, there's no medicine she has to take, but she just has to be aware of her menstrual cycle and she has to avoid sexual intercourse on these days so that she doesn't get pregnant. So that is the natural method. And some religions, prefer that because they feel this is, wrong to be using any other methods. So natural method. Then we come on to the chemical method. Now chemical method is of course not used. It is something, it is very, we don't even, I think nobody uses it in these day and age. These are these spermicidal jellies which is placed in the vagina and that will kill the sperms. So that is a chemical and that will have to be placed in the to kill the sperm so that no sperms can reach the ovum and no fertilization takes place. Then the hormonal I've discussed is the oral contraceptive pill in which the woman has to take this hormonal tablet every day. So these are called oral contraceptive pills and the woman takes this and she has to take it as long as she doesn't want to have a pregnancy. Then surgical are two. One is for men, which is called a vasectomy, in which we tie the sperm ducts, and in a woman it's tubal ligation. And in a tubal ligation, what we do is we tie the oviducts. So now, of course, this is final. This cannot be reopened or recanalized because this is, of course, when a couple has completed their family and then they do the surgical procedure. So this would be in the male vasectomy, in which we cut the sperm ducts on both sides so the sperms will not be delivered into the female tract. And in tubal ligation, what we do is that we tie the oviducts. So that means that the sperms cannot reach the ovum and no fertilization will take place. So the surgical and is final. So you can't sort of rethink this. You have to actually sign a legal that you agreed to this, and both as a husband and wife you agreed to it. Hormonal is the oral contraceptive pill which a woman has to take. We still have not developed a male hormonal pill. A mechanical is the intrauterine device. This is called an IUD or an intrauterine device in which a little inside the uterus, a trained gynecologist will put it's called a copper T and it's got made of copper and it's got a little thread which dangles from it into the vagina. And this prevents implantation, but this has a 1% failure rate. So intrauterine device in which you actually put in a little copper, made of copper, a very small T-shaped shaped structure which you insert into the uterus, and it remains inside the uterus. And there are some which, of course, release hormones as well. And this prevents, if fertilization takes place, it is going to prevent implantation, but it has a 1% failure rate. So these are the different birth control methods: natural, chemical, mechanical, intrauterine device, hormonal, and the surgical. Surgical is, of course, final. It needs, you need to go into a hospital, you need to train medical people to do these surgeries. So, of course, it costs money, and of course, you have to have antibiotics. There's a fear of infection as well. So it has all those advantages and its disadvantage, but it is final. The next topic is sexually transmitted diseases, and the first disease that you need to study is syphilis. Syphilis is caused by a bacteria. Please be very clear about that. It's not a virus, it's a bacteria which causes syphilis. And this can only be transferred from the male to the female or from the female to the male by sexual intercourse. That's it. So, method of transmission, and that's why these are called sexually transmitted infections or diseases. And because it is caused by a bacteria, so the treatment for it is antibiotics, and you need to take these antibiotics for 7 to 10 days, and of course the bacteria is destroyed and you are cured. But if you again are infected by your by the sexual partner, then of course you can get it again and again. So it's not a question of it that it gets you immunity to it. You can get it again and again if you're exposed to this bacteria again. The next disease that we need to know is, it says, discuss the spread of HIV and methods by which it may be controlled. So HIV is a virus and it results in a disease called AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. But basically, how is it spread? It's spread through sexual intercourse, number one, sharing of needles, number two, blood transfusion. If somebody gets a blood transfusion from an infected person, the person is infected with HIV, so of course that is going to happen. But it doesn't happen anymore now because people with we check blood before we transfuse from one person to another. Then mother to fetus across the placenta, or mother to the infant in breast milk. So basically, what is AIDS is a sexually transmitted infection. And how can it be controlled? I mean, basically, the control is that you have to just remember you don't share needles and you don't have blood transfusions, and of course, you avoid promiscuity, and basic education amongst the people to tell people about this, and to prevent the spread of this disease. So this is a sexually transmitted infection, and the name of the disease is AIDS, and of course the name of the virus is HIV, which is human immunodeficiency virus. And it's a virus, and there's no treatment for it. There's no treatment for it because we don't have any antiviral medicines. That's why we're having problems with corona, because we have no treatment for the viruses. And as soon as we develop a treatment, of course, then all these viral diseases will be easily to treat. So that finishes this chapter, and that finishes chapter 16, which is human reproduction. And I hope this has made this a little bit better. The whole chapter is clearer to you now. And thank you very much.